My name is Madison Clark. I'm 28 years old, and last night was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my year, my birthday. Instead, it was the moment that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. For weeks, my mom kept texting me, saying how Dad was planning something special. "You deserve to be celebrated," she said. For a second, I believed her. I put on my favorite navy blue dress, even curled my hair. I walked into the restaurant smiling, expecting hugs, laughter, maybe a few embarrassing baby stories. But when I reached the table, my smile froze. Sitting at the head of the table in my seat was Ethan Blake, my ex-boyfriend. The man who cheated on me 2 years ago with my so-called best friend. And standing right next to him was my dad, grinning proudly. "Madison! Look who I invited," he said like he was announcing a celebrity guest. I felt the blood rush to my face. I looked around the table. My brother Liam gave me an awkward shrug. My mom avoided eye contact. No one said a word when my dad casually patted the empty chair beside Ethan and said, "Sit here, sweetheart. Your usual spot is taken." I sat down, but not next to Ethan. I sat at the far end of the table, hands trembling, throat burning. That was supposed to be my night, my celebration. But in that moment, I realized I had never really had a seat in this family at all. Growing up in the Clark household always felt like living in a competition I never signed up for. My dad, Robert Clark, was a man who valued reputation over everything. He wasn't cruel in an obvious way. He just had a way of reminding me that I was never quite enough. When I was 8, I remember winning my first spelling bee. I came home with a gold ribbon, beaming with pride. Dad barely looked up from the newspaper. "You misspelled a word in round 3, didn't you?" he asked, as if the win didn't matter. My brother Liam, 2 years younger, never seemed to get the same scrutiny. When he struck out at baseball, Dad still clapped and called him champ. When I got a B+ in math, Dad would sigh and remind me that girls need to work twice as hard to stay ahead. Mom, Karen, wasn't much better. She was more worried about keeping Dad happy than standing up for me. If I cried, she would whisper, "Don't make your father upset, Madison. Just try harder next time." And then there was Ethan. Dad loved Ethan from the day I introduced him during college. Ethan had this clean-cut, all-American charm, the kind of guy my dad wished Liam would grow up to be. Even when Ethan and I fought, Dad would take his side. Once, when Ethan forgot my birthday completely, Dad just said, "Men get busy. Be patient with him." By the time Ethan cheated on me, I expected Dad to be angry. But he just shook his head and said, "You probably drove him away with that attitude of yours." I learned to swallow my hurt, to keep smiling, to keep proving my worth, even when it felt like no one in my own home was rooting for me. And somewhere deep down, I started believing what they implied, that maybe I really wasn't enough. After Ethan and I broke up, I thought maybe my family would finally see me, really see me, without him in the picture. I worked harder than ever to keep our relationships intact. I called every Sunday, even when Dad barely said more than, "How's work?" I sent gifts for every holiday, planned weekend visits, even helped Liam pay his first car insurance when Dad said it was his responsibility. But no matter what I did, it felt like Ethan's shadow followed me everywhere. At Thanksgiving, Dad still told stories about that time Ethan fixed the sink, or how handy Ethan was around the house. Mom would smile politely, like she had rehearsed forgetting how I used to cry in my room after we broke up. It wasn't just about Ethan. It was about the way I was expected to carry everything quietly. When Dad lost his job 2 years ago, I took on extra shifts at the marketing firm, sent money home, even skipped a vacation I'd been saving for. Nobody thanked me. When Mom had surgery last year, I stayed at the hospital every night while Liam went to parties. The one night I went home to sleep, Dad said, "Glad Liam stayed up with her. He's such a good son." I wanted to scream that I had been there every single night before that, but I swallowed it, just like always. And now, with my birthday coming up, I let myself hope again. I told myself this would be different, that maybe this year they'd celebrate me. Not Ethan, not Liam, me. When Dad texted, "Big dinner planned, can't wait to see you," my heart actually skipped a beat. I bought a new dress. I baked my own favorite cake, chocolate hazelnut, because Mom said she didn't have time. I was ready to feel loved, for once. But as I walked into that restaurant and saw Ethan in my seat, smiling like he belonged there more than I ever had, I realized all my sacrifices had bought me nothing, except a front row seat to my own humiliation. I sat there for 10 minutes, maybe 15, pretending to eat the bread they set on the table. Ethan was chatting with my dad like nothing had ever happened, telling him about his new promotion, his new car, his perfect new life. Every laugh they shared felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Finally, I set my fork down. "Why is he here?" My voice was calm, but it shook. Dad didn't even look guilty. "Because he's family, Madison. You need to let go of the past." The past? I stared at Ethan, then back at Dad. "He cheated on me. He humiliated me. And you invited him here, to my birthday dinner?" Dad's face hardened, the way it always did when I questioned him. "You're overreacting. This was supposed to be a nice night. Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it." Those words rang in my ears. I had spent my whole life not ruining things, not rocking the boat, swallowing my hurt. Liam stayed quiet, looking at his plate. Mom whispered, "Madison, please sit down," but didn't meet my eyes. Ethan smirked. That was it. I stood up, grabbed my purse and said, "You can have my seat, Dad." Looks like it was never mine anyway. No one followed me out. The sound of the restaurant door closing behind me was so loud it felt final, like a chapter slamming shut. Outside, the night was cool, but I was shaking, hot with anger, heartbreak, and something else I hadn't felt before: freedom. When I got home that night, I didn't cry. Not at first. I just stood in my kitchen, staring at the half-finished cake I'd brought home from the restaurant. It felt like proof. Proof that I had been foolish enough to think they would celebrate me. The crying came later. Hard, ugly sobs that left me gasping for air. But when the tears stopped, something inside me shifted. For the first time, I didn't want to explain myself. Didn't want to fix anything. I wanted to disappear. The next morning, I started making lists. I sold the couch I had bought for family movie nights no one ever attended. I canceled the flower subscription I had set up for Mom. I quit the marketing firm, packed my clothes, and put my apartment up for sublease. Within 3 weeks, I was gone. I found a small one-bedroom apartment in Asheville, North Carolina, a city where nobody knew me. The rent was cheap, the air smelled like rain, and no one called me dramatic for wanting space. I found a job at a small community bookstore. It didn't pay as much as marketing, but I loved it. Loved the quiet, loved the smell of paper and coffee, loved recommending books to strangers and watching their faces light up. At first, the silence was deafening. No family group chat notifications, no guilt-laden calls from Dad, no awkward texts from Liam. Just me. I started journaling. Really journaling. Not the polite gratitude lists I used to make to convince myself life was fine, but honest entries. Angry entries. Sad ones. Hopeful ones. I made friends. Real friends. People who didn't know me as Robert Clark's daughter or Ethan Blake's ex-girlfriend. They knew me as Madison, the woman who loved mystery novels and hated black coffee. Slowly, I began to feel lighter. The weight I had carried for years, of being the good daughter, of keeping the peace, started to slip away. One night, Almost 6 months after I left, I baked myself another chocolate hazelnut cake. This time, I ate a slice while sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment, music playing softly in the background. For the first time in years, I smiled without forcing it, and it felt like the beginning of something new. It took about 2 months before the first text came. From Mom. Mom, your dad isn't sleeping well. He feels awful about what happened. Can't you just come home for one dinner? I stared at the message for a long time, then put the phone down. For years, I had been trained to respond, to fix, to smooth things over. But this time, I let the message sit unanswered. A week later, Dad called. His voice was calm, measured, too measured. Madison, it's time to stop this nonsense. Families fight, then they move on. Ethan's been checking in on us. He cares more than you do, apparently. That one stung, but instead of crying, I just said, then let him be your daughter. And I hung up. The guilt tripping didn't stop. Mom texted photos of Dad looking tired on the couch. Liam sent a casual, hey, you good sigh message, but never mentioned the dinner or Ethan. Then came the ultimate blow. Dad called saying he was unwell and wanted to see me. For a moment, my heart clenched. What if he really was sick? But then I heard him laugh in the background, talking to someone. Ethan. And just like that, I knew it was another trap. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed my journal and went to work, helping a customer find a book for her daughter's birthday. When she thanked me, genuinely thanked me, I felt something warm in my chest. I realized my family wasn't calling because they missed me. They were calling because they missed controlling me. And I was never going back to that version of me again. My next birthday came faster than I expected. This time, I didn't wait for anyone to plan something for me. I invited my new friends from the bookstore, the neighbor who always brought me fresh muffins, and the barista who never got my coffee order wrong. We crammed into my tiny apartment, ate pizza on the floor, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. There was no fancy restaurant, no uncomfortable silences, no ex-boyfriend stealing my chair. When it was time for cake, I lit the candles myself, closed my eyes, and made a wish, not for things to go back to the way they were, but for strength to keep moving forward. As everyone sang, I felt tears sting my eyes, but they weren't sad tears. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for my dad's approval, my mom's careful smile, or my brother's awkward nod. I was surrounded by people who saw me, who chose me, without conditions, without history, without judgment. And in that moment, I finally understood. Leaving hadn't been selfish. It had been survival. My family might never understand why I walked away. Maybe they still think I'm dramatic or ungrateful. But I don't need them to understand anymore. Because family isn't just blood. Family is the people who clap for you when you win, who sit beside you when you lose, who never make you fight for your seat at the table. So, to anyone who feels like the black sheep, the forgotten child, the one always sitting at the far end of the table, listen to me. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to leave. And when you do, you might just find that your life finally begins. I blew out the candles with a smile. This time, the wish was already coming true.